First class, not for someone like you. Kendra Walsh said it loudly enough for the people behind Adrienne Mercer to hear. Then she pressed the hand sanitizer dispenser, where Adrienne's boarding pass had touched the counter. Adrienne kept her voice calm. "I have a first-class ticket, ma'am." "You?" Kendra looked her up and down, then gave a short, dismissive laugh. "Someone dressed like you couldn't afford this cabin." A man in line laughed under his breath. A woman nearby shook her head, not at Kendra, but at Adrienne. Adrienne reached into her blazer. "This is my passport." Kendra took it sharply. "People like you fake everything. I don't trust this." She snapped her wrist and sent the passport across the space between them. It struck Adrienne's cheek and fell to the floor. "Pick it up," Kendra said. "Get down there and pick it up, and don't touch my counter again." Adrienne lowered herself, picked up the passport and stood. She did not cry. She did not shout. She did not look away. Her eyes settled on the name tag clipped to Kendra's uniform. Kendra Walsh, Senior Gate Agent. Then, Kendra turned to the next passenger, as if nothing had happened. "So sorry about that, sir. How can I help you?" But not long after, 3 figures in pressed military uniforms would come walking through that terminal. And when Kendra saw the stars on their shoulders, her hands would begin to shake. Adrienne Mercer was the kind of woman most people would not look at twice. She was in her mid-40s, average height, dressed in a navy blazer that had seen better days, faded jeans, and white sneakers with a crease across one toe. No rings, no bracelets, no expensive perfume announcing her arrival. Only a plain steel watch on her left wrist, military issue, old enough to have scratches across the face. She carried one leather bag, soft from years of use, worn around the handles, small enough to fit beneath an airline seat. The zipper pulled slightly to one side. Adrienne never checked luggage if she could avoid it. More than 2 decades in the United States Army had taught her to travel light and keep important things close. Earlier that day, she had stood in a small office at Fort Liberty, North Carolina. The room smelled like old coffee, printer ink, and the faint dust of files that had been opened too many times. A letter rested on the desk. The seal of the Department of Defense sat at the top. The words beneath it confirmed something Adrienne had worked toward for years. She had been appointed Deputy Inspector General for the Department of Defense. She was expected at the Pentagon for orientation. Adrienne had read the letter more than once. Then she folded it carefully and slipped it into the inside pocket of her blazer, the pocket closest to her chest. After that, she drove to Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. The terminal was enormous, crowded, and constantly moving. Concourses stretched in every direction. Planes arrived and departed without pause. Thousands of people crossed paths without really seeing one another. Adrienne liked that. She moved through the terminal at an even pace, not slow, not rushed. It was the walk of someone who had crossed military airfields overseas, briefing rooms at the Pentagon, and government hallways where every word and every step could matter. She did not hurry because she had learned long ago that panic rarely improves a decision. At the baggage counter, an elderly white woman struggled with an oversized suitcase. The handle had jammed. The woman tugged at it, embarrassed, while people behind her shifted impatiently. Adrienne stepped closer. "May I help you with that, ma'am?" The woman looked up. "Oh, yes, please, thank you." Adrienne freed the handle with one firm pull, lifted the suitcase onto the scale, and smiled. The woman touched Adrienne's arm in gratitude. Behind the counter, a young airline employee named Sierra Bennett watched the whole thing. Sierra was new to the job. She still believed the line from her training manual that said every passenger deserved respect. She noticed Adrienne's kindness and quietly stored the moment away in her mind. She had no idea yet why she would remember it so clearly later. Gate B14 sat near the far end of the concourse. The waiting area was only partly full. A family wore matching theme park backpacks. A college student disappeared beneath oversized headphones. 2 businessmen compared boarding passes. People drank coffee, checked phones, and waited for another ordinary flight. Behind the counter stood Kendra Walsh. She was in her late 30s and had worked for Atlantic Continental Airlines for more than a decade. She had once been praised as one of the company's strongest gate agents. Then complaints began appearing in her file. Kendra had a voice that carried. She also had a smile. She could switch on and off whenever it suited her. A white couple in pressed linen stood at her counter with first-class tickets. Kendra leaned forward warmly. "You two are going to love these seats. I moved you where you'll have a little more space. Don't tell anyone." She winked. The couple laughed and walked away. Kendra's smile followed them for only a few steps. Then it disappeared. Her eyes moved down the line, past the family, past the student. Then they landed on Adrienne. Jeans, sneakers, worn leather bag, black woman. Kendra's lip curled slightly. Sierra saw it. "Next," Kendra called. Her voice had changed. Flat, cold. The warmth she had offered the couple was gone. Adrienne stepped forward. Above them, a security camera sat in the corner where the wall met the jet bridge entrance. A small red light blinked steadily. Recording. At another gate farther down the concourse, a flight from Washington, District of Columbia, had just arrived. 3 passengers on that plane had been seated together. All 3 wore senior military uniforms. All 3 had the kind of authority that could bring immediate attention from airline executives, airport leaders, and federal offices. They had not yet entered the concourse. Adrienne placed her boarding pass on the counter. Gently, deliberately. Kendra did not touch it. She stared at the ticket from a distance. First class. She said the words aloud, almost as if she were announcing them to everyone except Adrienne. First class. A man several places back leaned sideways to get a better look. A woman with a rolling bag tilted her head. "I'll need your passport," Kendra said. "No, please. No smile. No eye contact." She extended one hand without warmth. Adrienne reached into her blazer and gave her the passport. Kendra took it between her thumb and index finger. Only 2 fingers, as if touching it normally would somehow contaminate her. She opened the passport slowly and held it away from her body. Her eyes moved between the photograph and Adrienne's face, back and forth, again and again. "Doesn't even look like you," she muttered. She put the passport on the counter. Then, while looking directly at Adrienne, Kendra reached beneath the desk and pressed the sanitizer dispenser. Once, then again. She rubbed her hands together slowly and deliberately. The wet sound of sanitizer spread through the awkward silence. 2 passengers exchanged glances. One looked uncomfortable. Neither spoke. A supervisor named Graham Voss appeared behind the counter. He was in his 50s, with thinning hair combed to one side and the permanent expression of a man who had built a career by avoiding decisions. Kendra had called him over after seeing Adrienne's ticket. She had said she had a situation. Graham looked at the boarding pass, then at Adrienne, then at Kendra. His mouth opened, then closed. He picked up the pass. He scanned it. The system accepted it immediately. "Looks fine to me," he said. That was all. He turned and walked away. He did not ask Adrienne whether there had been a problem. He did not address the sanitizer. He did not ask why Kendra was speaking to the passenger differently from everyone else. He did nothing that might later require him to explain a decision. Graham had spent years surviving through inaction. This moment was no different. Kendra watched him leave. Her nostrils flared. She had called him expecting support. Instead, he had confirmed in front of everyone that Adrienne's boarding pass was valid. Adrienne saw the embarrassment land on Kendra's face, and she saw what came after it, anger. Kendra turned back to Adrienne. Her voice dropped lower. "People like you always try this." Adrienne said nothing. "You show up with expensive tickets, clothes that don't match, and expect everyone to believe it." Still Adrienne said nothing. "I've seen it before. Stolen cards, borrowed tickets, fake documents. You think I can't tell?" A man behind Adrienne shifted his weight. He stared at his phone. A woman pulled her son closer and whispered something in his ear. The boy looked at Adrienne with wide eyes. No one said stop. No one said that's enough. No one stepped forward. Kendra picked up the passport again. This time she held it beside Adrienne's face. "The photo looks different," she said. "The lighting is different. The features don't match." She shook her head slowly, making a performance out of the comparison. "I don't trust this." Then she flicked her wrist. Hard. The passport. spun through the air. It struck Adrian on the left cheekbone and dropped to the tile floor. The sound was small, sharp, like a book being snapped shut. The gate went instantly quiet. Not gradually. Instantly. Dozens of people seemed to inhale together. Kendra leaned forward against the counter and crossed her arms. "Pick it up." Adrian did not move. "I said pick it up. Get down there and pick it up. And when you're done, get out of my line. Because you're not getting on this plane." A teenager, several rows away, raised his phone. The camera was already recording. I did not speak. He simply filmed. A woman in a business suit looked at Kendra, then at Adrienne. Then she looked away. She adjusted her scarf, checked her watch, pretended to be somewhere else. The man who had leaned forward earlier released a short breath that sounded almost like a laugh. I did not intervene. Adrienne bent down. One knee touched the cold tile. Her fingers closed around the passport. The edge that had struck her cheek felt hard against her hand. A warm pulse spread beneath her left eye. She stood slowly, not because she had been broken, because she was choosing every movement. She had spent years making decisions in places where panic could cost lives. She knew how to separate emotion from action. Adrienne slid the passport into the inside pocket of her blazer, the same pocket holding her appointment letter from the Department of Defense. Then she pulled out her phone. She did not call anyone. She did not shout. She opened the notes application. She began documenting. Day of travel. Approximate time. Gate B14. Concourse B. Hartsfield-Jackson, Atlanta International Airport. Employee, Kendra Walsh. Employee identification number from the name badge. Incident, passport intentionally thrown into face. Witnesses, several dozen. Supervisor present, Graham Voss. No meaningful intervention. She typed quickly and precisely. The way someone types after writing military incident reports for more than 2 decades. Behind the counter, Sierra Bennett stood frozen. Her hands gripped the edge of the desk. She had seen everything. The sanitizer, the way Kendra held the passport, the remarks, the throw. And this was not the first time Sierra had seen behavior like it. She remembered an elderly black passenger Kendra had treated with contempt. She remembered a Hispanic family whose seats had mysteriously been canceled. She remembered other moments she had tried to explain away because she was new and afraid. She had noticed the pattern. She had documented nothing. She had said nothing. Until now. Sierra slid one hand into her pocket and unlocked her phone beneath the counter. She opened the airline's anonymous reporting portal. Her thumb hovered above the screen. She did not press submit yet. But she did not close the page either. A few gates away, a retired Army staff sergeant named Darius Cole sat reading a paperback. Crew cut, square jaw, combat boots tucked beneath his seat. I had served for decades. From where he sat, he could not hear every word, but he had seen the body language. The moment the passport struck Adrienne's face, the controlled kneel, the deliberate rise, the stillness afterward. Darius closed his book. That woman has training, he thought. That is discipline. I did not intervene. Later he would regret that. But in that moment he watched, and he remembered. Kendra had already moved on. The next passengers were a white couple. As soon as they stepped to the counter, her expression transformed. The coldness vanished. The smile returned. "Hi there. Welcome aboard. First class. Wonderful. May I see your passes?" She laughed at the husband's joke. She touched the woman's hand. She printed their boarding documents with a flourish. A short distance away, Adrienne stood quietly with her phone in one hand. The red mark on her cheek was beginning to deepen. She remained still, watching. Kendra picked up the intercom and announced that the flight would board from a different gate nearby. She gave the message in a bright, professional voice. But before making the announcement, she quietly told the white couple about the change and pointed them in the right direction. The family heard the announcement. The businessman heard it. The college student heard it. Adrienne heard it. But 2 black passengers standing behind her, a young mother holding a toddler and an older man with a cane, were speaking to each other and missed the message. No employee walked over to tell them. No one tapped them on the shoulder. Adrienne turned. "Excuse me, the gate changed. It's B16. The young mother blinked. "What? When?" "Just now." The older man shook his head. "Happens more often than it should," he said quietly. Adrian helped the young mother fold her stroller. The older man began walking toward the new gate. Adrian watched them leave. Then she looked back. Kendra was staring at her from behind the counter. Their eyes met. Kendra looked away first. At another gate, the arriving flight from Washington had finished unloading. 3 senior officers stepped into the terminal. Their uniforms were pressed. Their caps were tucked beneath their arms. Stars shone on their shoulders, beneath the fluorescent lights. Adrienne found a seat at gate B16. She chose the end of a row with her back against the wall and a clear view of the corridor. An old habit. Always know where the exits are. Always know who is approaching. The red mark beneath her eye pulsed with a dull ache. She placed her leather bag on the empty seat beside her and opened the front pocket. Inside was a manila folder held closed with a rubber band. Adrienne slid it out and opened it across her lap. The Department of Defense seal sat at the top page. A security marking was printed across the document. She did not read the contents. She already knew them. She only needed to hold something familiar, something that reminded her who she was. Because Kendra Walsh had just spent several minutes trying to convince Adrienne that she was less than everyone else in that terminal. Adrienne closed the folder and returned it to the bag. Then she leaned back and closed her eyes. A memory came to her. Fort Liberty. Her father, Master Sergeant Calvin Mercer, kneeling in front of her on the porch when she was a little girl. His hands were enormous. His voice was gentle. "Baby girl, people are going to look at you and decide who you are before you ever open your mouth. That's their mistake. Your job is to know who you are so deeply that somebody else's opinion cannot reach the center of you." Adrienne had carried those words for most of her life. She enlisted young. She attended West Point. She deployed overseas. She served in Iraq. She served in Afghanistan. She earned decorations for leadership and service. She rose into senior Army oversight work and became one of the highest-ranking black women in that part of the service. She had heard ugly words before. She had heard them in places where the danger around her was far greater than a boarding gate. But there was something about this moment that stayed with her. The sanitizer, the 2-finger grip on the passport, the fluorescent light, the laughter, the order to kneel, and perhaps most of all, the silence of all those people who watched. Adrienne opened her eyes. Then she made a call. Operations desk, Inspector General's office. "This is Colonel Adrienne Mercer." Her voice remained measured. "I need 2 things. First, the civil rights liaison for Atlantic Continental Airlines at the corporate level. Second, pull the full internal complaint history for Gate B14 at Hartsfield-Jackson, Atlanta International Airport. I want every relevant report available for review before I reach Washington." The person on the other end confirmed the request. Adrienne ended the call and placed the phone face down on her knee. For the first time since the passport struck her cheek, something changed behind her eyes. Not tears, not rage, something steadier. The look of someone who had stopped asking whether the moment would matter and had started deciding how to document it properly. Back at gate B14, Kendra was leaning against the counter with a soda in her hand. The boarding area was nearly empty now, because most passengers had moved to the new gate. Kendra retold the story to 2 co-workers. "You should have seen her face," she said. She mimed the flick of her wrist. "Right there." One co-worker gave an awkward laugh. Another shook his head. Kendra grinned. She acted like she belonged in first class. Sierra stood only a few feet away, restocking boarding pass paper. She did not laugh. Her jaw was tight. The anonymous reporting portal remained open on her phone. Finally, Sierra typed. Kendra threw a passenger's passport at her face. Her thumb moved to the submit button. She pressed it. At the far end of the concourse, 3 senior officers moved through the terminal together. Lieutenant General Jameson Reeves, Major General Patricia Vance, Brigadier General Raymond Ellis. Between them, 6 stars rested on their shoulders. They had come directly from a military ceremony and had not changed clothes. Their shoes clicked against the polished floor. Travelers moved aside without quite understanding why. As the officers passed gate B16, Jameson Reeves looked into the waiting area. I saw a crowded gate, passengers standing, families shifting bags. Then he saw a woman seated at the end of the row with her back against the wall. Navy blazer, faded jeans, steel watch, a red mark on her cheek. He stopped. Adrienne, his voice carried naturally. Not loud, not commanding, simply unmistakable. Adrienne looked up. The three officers stood at the edge of the waiting area. Their uniforms were sharp. Medals lined their chests. Stars gleamed on their shoulders. Jameson Reeves was a 3-star lieutenant general and a senior leader in the United States Army. I had known Adrienne since she was a young officer. I had supported her career, mentored her, and watched her rise. Patricia Vance was a 2-star major general who led one of the military's most important equal opportunity institutions. Her career centered on confronting discrimination inside large organizations. Raymond Ellis was a 1-star brigadier general serving in the office of the Inspector General. He would be Adrienne's direct superior in her new position. 6 stars, standing in a civilian airport terminal, looking at a woman in jeans and sneakers with a red mark beneath her eye. Adrienne stood automatically. More than 2 decades of military habit straightened her posture before she even thought about it. Reeves walked toward her. I extended his hand, then changed his mind. He raised it to a formal salute. In a civilian terminal, in front of everyone. "Colonel Mercer," he said clearly. "It's good to see you." The gate went still. The man in the golf shirt froze. The woman who had looked away lowered her hand. The teenager who had recorded the confrontation swung his camera toward the officers. Whispers moved through the waiting area. "Colonel? She's a colonel? The woman from the gate?" Patricia Vance stepped forward and took Adrienne's hand. "Congratulations on the appointment, Adrienne." The secretary signed off. "Deputy Inspector General. You've earned it." Raymond Ellis nodded. "Well deserved, Colonel. We'll make it official at orientation. But as far as I'm concerned, the responsibility begins now." Adrienne looked at the 3 of them. 3 senior officers, 6 stars. Not there because she needed rescuing. There because she had earned their respect over years of service. "Thank you," she said. Reeves studied her face. I had known Adrienne long enough to recognize when something was wrong. "What happened to your cheek?" Adrienne's hand moved toward the mark. Stopped, then dropped. "It's nothing." Adrienne. The way Reeves said her name changed the meaning. Not general to colonel, mentor to person. I had used that same tone years earlier when Adrienne tried to minimize an injury during a deployment. Adrienne exhaled. Then she told them. The counter, the sanitizer, the way Kendra pinched the passport between 2 fingers, the insulting remarks, the accusation that she did not belong, the passport thrown into her face, the order to kneel, the laughter, the people filming, the people who looked away, the man who almost laughed, the silence. Adrienne described it like an incident report. Clear, precise, no exaggeration, no dramatic language. She gave the gate number, the employee's name, the employee identification, the supervisor's name, the number of witnesses, the lack of intervention. But while she spoke, the fingers of one hand rested against the sore place on her cheek. They trembled slightly, only slightly. Reeves noticed. The silence, after she finished, felt heavier than the noise of the entire concourse. Reeves's jaw tightened. Patricia Vance gripped her briefcase. Raymond Ellis closed his eyes for a brief moment. Then all 3 made the same choice. Action before anger. Reeves spoke first. "Which gate?" "B14. Is the agent still there?" "She was when I left." Patricia already had her phone out. She called Atlantic Continental Airlines. "This is Major General Patricia Vance, Department of Defense. I need your government affairs liaison. Not customer service, not public relations. Your government affairs liaison." She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Raymond turned to Adrienne. "Colonel, I want a formal written statement filed through Inspector General channels before you board. Use the field incident format. I'll countersign it." "Already drafted," Adrienne said. She held up her phone. Raymond looked at the notes. Everything was there. Location, people, sequence, witnesses, supervisor. Raymond gave a small nod. More than 2 decades in service, and you still document like a brand new lieutenant. You taught me, sir. A faint smile crossed his face. Then it disappeared. Reeves was already walking back toward gate B14. His shoes struck the tile in a steady rhythm. Patricia followed with the phone against her ear. Raymond placed a brief hand on Adrienne's shoulder. The touch said what words did not need to. We heard you. Then he followed the other 2. 3 generals, 6 stars, walking back through the concourse. At gate B14, Kendra Walsh was still leaning against the counter. She was talking to co-workers. She saw the uniforms approaching from a distance. The smile vanished from her face. Her soda trembled in her hand. She tried to set it down. The cup tipped. Liquid spilled across the keyboard. Kendra barely noticed. Lieutenant General Jameson Reeves reached the counter first. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, chin level, 3 stars under the fluorescent lights. The posture of a man who had commanded thousands of soldiers and sat across from people at the highest levels of government. The gate area quieted without him asking. Kendra stared at the stars on his shoulders. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. Patricia Vance stood to his left. 2 stars, briefcase in hand, calm expression. Raymond Ellis stood on the right. 1 star, arms folded, watching. Reeves spoke. I need your name. Kendra's voice cracked. Kendra Walsh. Miss Walsh, I'm Lieutenant General Jameson Reeves, United States Army. I need your supervisor here immediately. Kendra reached for the desk phone. Her hand shook so badly that she missed the receiver the first time. She picked it up again and called Graham Voss. He's coming, she said. Good. Reeves said nothing else. He simply waited. Graham arrived, expecting an ordinary passenger complaint. He adjusted his tie as he walked. Then he saw the uniforms. He stopped. Good afternoon. I'm Graham Voss, shift supervisor. How can I help you? Reeves looked directly at him. Mr. Voss, one of your employees physically struck a United States Army colonel with her passport at this gate. The same employee made discriminatory remarks in front of multiple witnesses and ordered the passenger to get on her knees to retrieve her own identification. I want the security footage from this gate preserved and reviewed. Every available camera angle. I also want the relevant passenger complaint history preserved immediately. Graham looked at Kendra. Kendra stared at the counter. There must be some misunderstanding, Graham said. Kendra is one of our senior agents. There is no misunderstanding, Reeves said. His voice did not become louder. That made it more powerful. Preserve the footage. Now. Graham nodded quickly. Yes, of course. He reached for his radio. The airport's Security Operations Center sat inside the administrative wing. Rows of monitors showed live feeds from cameras throughout the terminal. Security personnel located gate B14. One camera showed the counter from above. Another showed the interaction from the side. The footage was clear. Adrienne approached. Kendra's posture changed. The sanitizer came out. Kendra rubbed her hands while staring at Adrienne. Then she held the passport away from her body. Then beside Adrienne's face. Then came the throw. The security officer reviewing the footage paused. He rewound, played it slowly. Kendra's wrist moved. The passport left her hand. Spun, struck Adrienne's cheek, dropped to the floor. The officer looked at Reeves. That wasn't an accident. Reeves did not respond emotionally. Continue. The footage continued. Adrienne knelt, picked up the passport, stood, read Kendra's name tag. Then Kendra turned to the next passenger. Her smile returned instantly. Warmth returned. Professional charm returned. The contrast was impossible to miss. The room stayed quiet. Patricia Vance used a nearby conference room to speak with Sierra Bennett. Sierra sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her eyes were red. Patricia spoke gently. Take your time. Sierra shook her head. I don't need time. I have needed to say this for a long time. Then she told the truth. This was not the first incident. She described an elderly black veteran who had been subjected to unnecessary scrutiny after Kendra decided his first-class ticket looked wrong. She described a Hispanic family whose seats had been cancelled under circumstances Sierra believed were deliberate. She described a Muslim woman wearing a hijab who was reported as suspicious while doing nothing more threatening than reading a book. Patricia listened. "Did you report any of these?" Sierra looked down. "No." "Why not?" "I was afraid. Kendra has been here for years. I'm new. Everyone knows how she treats certain passengers. People talk about it, but complaints go to Graham, and they disappear." Patricia wrote in her notebook, "How many incidents have you personally witnessed?" Sierra thought, "Enough that I should have spoken sooner." Her voice cracked. "I told myself I was new. I told myself someone else would handle it. I told myself I couldn't risk my job." She looked up. "Today I realized that every time I stayed quiet, I was helping the next incident happen." Patricia set down her pen. "You reported this one." Sierra nodded. I pressed submit. "Good," Patricia said. "That matters." Raymond Ellis began reviewing personnel and complaint records with the airline's human resources liaison. Several formal complaints had been filed against Kendra over the years. All came from passengers of color. All had been routed through Graham Voss. All had been closed with nearly identical language. Misunderstanding. Employee counseled. No further action required. The wording barely changed. Raymond spread the complaint summaries across the table. Different passengers. Different incidents. Same supervisor. Same conclusion. "Mr. Voss," Raymond said, "did you investigate these complaints?" Graham shifted uncomfortably. "I spoke with Kendra." "Did you review security footage?" "Not in every case." "In any case?" Graham did not answer. "Did you interview witnesses?" Silence. "Did you contact the passengers who filed the complaints?" Graham looked down. "No." Raymond's voice remained controlled. "Then you did not investigate them." Graham tugged at his collar. "Kendra told me they were misunderstandings. And you accepted that without checking." Graham said nothing. Raymond looked at the stack of files. "This is not one bad afternoon. This is a pattern of complaints being closed without meaningful review." Darius Cole, the retired staff sergeant who had watched from another gate, found his way to airport security on his own. No one summoned him. He asked where he could give a statement and walked there himself. "I was there," he said. "I saw what happened. I want it on the record." They sat him down. Darius spoke in the clipped, precise language of someone who had written military reports for most of his adult life. "I had a clear line of sight to the counter. I observed the gate agent speaking to a black female passenger in an aggressive and degrading manner. I observed the gate agent deliberately propel the passenger's passport toward her face. The passenger did not respond with aggression. She remained controlled." Darius paused. Then he looked at his hands. "I also want this in the statement." The interviewer waited. "I should have said something when it happened." Darius swallowed. "I saw it. I knew it was wrong. I stayed in my chair. No one told me to stay quiet. I chose quiet because speaking would have been uncomfortable." He shook his head. "That's on me, but I'm speaking now." While officials gathered statements and reviewed footage, the teenager's short video from the gate began spreading online. The recording was shaky, vertical, unpolished. It did not need commentary. People could see the passport strike Adrienne's face. They could hear Kendra's tone. They could see Adrienne kneel and pick up the document. The video spread rapidly. Views climbed from thousands to hundreds of thousands, and then into the millions. People demanded answers. Some called for Kendra's termination. Others focused on the passengers who watched without intervening. Many asked the same question. How many times had something like this happened when no one was recording? News crews arrived outside the airport. Reporters gathered near the airline's logo. Atlantic Continental issued a short statement acknowledging the incident and promising a full internal review. The statement did little to calm the reaction. The company's leadership convened an emergency meeting. Investors reacted. Board members asked why earlier complaints had not reached them. Meanwhile, Kendra sat in a windowless room inside the airport. 2 security employees had escorted her there. No one handcuffed her. No one shouted. They simply asked her to come with them. Kendra sat in a plastic chair beneath fluorescent light with her hands on the table. An internal affairs investigator named Marin Adler entered. She was calm, professional, and carried a laptop. "Miss Walsh, I'm going to show you something. Then I'm going to ask you some questions. Maren opened the laptop. She played the security footage. Kendra watched herself. The sanitizer, the two-finger grip, the inspection of the passport, the remarks, the flick of her wrist, the passport striking Adrian, the order to pick it up. Then, the instant change when the next passengers approached. Maren played it again. Kendra pressed her lips together. It looks worse than it was. Maren waited. Kendra continued. She was being difficult. She didn't look like she belonged in first class. Maren leaned slightly forward. What does a first-class passenger look like? Kendra opened her mouth. Closed it. I didn't mean it like that. Maren let the silence sit. Then she spoke. The passenger you struck is Colonel Adrienne Mercer. She has served in the United States Army for more than 2 decades. She has received senior military decorations for her service. She has also been appointed Deputy Inspector General for the Department of Defense. Kendra's eyes widened. I didn't know. Maren's expression did not change. Would it have mattered? Kendra said nothing. Maren turned the laptop slightly. The frozen image showed Kendra's hand in motion and the passport between her and Adrienne's face. On what basis did you decide she did not belong? Kendra stared at the screen. No answer came. That question became one of the most important questions in the entire story. Not whether Kendra knew Adrienne's rank. Not whether she knew about the Pentagon appointment. Not whether she knew 3 generals were walking through the terminal. Would Kendra have behaved differently if Adrienne looked powerful? And if the answer was yes, what did that say about every passenger who had no title, no uniform, and no influential person nearby? Atlantic Continental's chief executive officer later addressed the public. He stood behind a podium at company headquarters and spoke without trying to hide behind polished language. What happened at Gate B14 is indefensible. He paused. It does not reflect the standard we claim to have, but it does reveal what we allowed to continue. That responsibility belongs to us. He announced the company's decisions. Kendra Walsh was terminated. The airline issued a formal apology to Colonel Adrienne Mercer. Graham Voss was removed from supervisory duties and placed under separate review for his handling of earlier passenger complaints. Additional managers who had received forwarded complaints without taking meaningful action were also reviewed. The chief executive officer looked into the camera. We failed more than once, he said, and the greatest failure was not recognizing the pattern when passengers were already telling us something was wrong. Then came the reforms. All employees would receive substantial in-person anti-discrimination training. Not a quick online video that people could click through without thinking. The program would be developed with outside experts and equal opportunity professionals. The airline introduced stronger consequences for discriminatory conduct. Passenger complaints would no longer be handled entirely by the same local managers who worked alongside the employees being accused. As independent review process would include outside civil rights specialists. Every formal complaint would require documentation. Every outcome would have to be recorded. Senior leadership would receive regular reports. High-traffic gates would begin testing expanded recording systems, so disputed interactions could be reviewed more clearly. The Department of Transportation also began examining the airline's complaint handling procedures. Federal oversight followed. Atlantic Continental had no choice but to cooperate. Adrienne eventually spoke publicly. She wore her army dress uniform. The mark on her cheek had faded until it was barely visible. She stood in a Pentagon briefing room before reporters and cameras. She did not read from a prepared script. What happened to me at Gate B14 happens to travelers who do not have my title or my connections. She paused. It happens in airports, hotels, rental car counters, restaurants, workplaces, places where a person behind a desk or counter has enough authority to make someone else feel small. The difference in my case is that senior officers happen to walk through the terminal. Most people do not have that. Most people pick up the document, swallow the anger, try to get through the day. Sometimes they file a complaint. Sometimes they go home. Sometimes nothing changes. Adrienne looked across the room. The system has to work for everyone. especially when nobody important is watching, especially when there are no cameras, especially when the person being treated badly has no stars on their shoulders, no famous title, and no powerful number to call. That is the standard, and we still have work to do. She took no questions. She stepped away from the podium. The cameras followed until she disappeared through a side door. Sierra Bennett received a letter from Atlantic Continental. She had been promoted. More importantly, the airline created a new passenger dignity role and asked Sierra to serve in it. Her responsibility would be to monitor gate interactions, review concerns, and help passengers who believed they had been mistreated. The position existed in part because Sierra had finally pressed one button on her phone when staying silent would have been easier. She pinned the new badge to her lanyard and returned to gate B14. The same counter, the same lights, the same security camera in the corner. But Sierra no longer looked at the training manual as something separate from real life. She understood what those words actually required. Every passenger deserves respect. Not only when the passenger is polite, not only when the passenger looks wealthy, not only when the passenger has status. Every passenger. Kendra Walsh left the airline carrying a cardboard box filled with personal belongings, a company coffee mug, a few framed photographs, items gathered over many years at the job. No reporters waited outside. The news cycle had moved on. Kendra placed the box in her car and sat behind the wheel. Her hands rested on the steering wheel. For a long time, she did not start the engine. What she thought in that moment was hers alone. Whether she understood the lesson was impossible to know. But the system around her had finally been forced to learn something. Later, gate B14 looked much the same. Same counter, same terminal lighting, same security camera blinking in the corner. But a new sign hung behind the desk. Every passenger deserves dignity. Sierra had requested it. Management approved it quickly. One day, an older black woman approached the counter. Silver hair, nervous hands. She placed her boarding pass down carefully, almost too carefully. The way some people do when they have been made to feel that even asking for normal service is asking for too much. Sierra looked at the pass. "First class, ma'am." The woman nodded. She seemed to brace herself. Sierra smiled. "Welcome aboard. You have a window seat near the front. Can I help you with your bag?" The woman blinked. For a moment, she looked as though she were waiting for the hidden condition. There was none. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Of course. Have a wonderful flight." The woman walked toward the jet bridge. Her shoulders relaxed with each step. By the time she reached the door, she stood a little taller. Sierra watched her go. Then she turned to the next passenger. At the Pentagon, Adrienne sat behind a desk she was still getting used to. A new nameplate rested in front of her. Deputy Inspector General. The title was new. The responsibility was not. A review report from Atlantic Continental lay open on the desk. Passenger discrimination complaints from travelers of color had declined significantly after the new policies. Employee misconduct reports had increased, not because every workplace problem had suddenly become worse, because employees were finally using the reporting system. People who had once stayed silent were beginning to document what they saw. The anonymous portal Sierra had used was receiving a steady stream of submissions. Adrienne read the report twice. Then she closed the folder. Not perfect, she thought. Not close, but movement. Real movement. Documented movement. The kind of change that rarely becomes a headline, but changes what happens in quiet moments at counters, gates, desks, and lines where no senior official is watching. Adrienne touched the place on her cheek where the passport had struck her. The mark was gone. Sometimes the memory was not. On certain mornings she could still feel the weight of the passport spinning through the air. The surprise. The heat beneath her eye. The silence around her. She let the memory come. Then she let it go. Later, Adrienne passed through Atlanta again. Civilian clothes. Same worn leather bag. Same steel watch. A gate agent looked at her boarding pass and smiled. "Welcome aboard, ma'am. First class. Can I help you with anything?" Adrienne smiled back. "No, thank you. I'm good." She walked down the jet bridge, found her seat, and looked out the window at the runway stretching beneath the Georgia sky. She was good. Not because what happened had become acceptable, not because she had forgotten, and not because Kendra had lost her job. Adrienne was good because she had refused to let one person's judgment become her identity. That is one of the deepest lessons in this story. Dignity is not a reward for looking important. It is not something a person earns by wearing a uniform, carrying a title, sitting in first class, or knowing powerful people. Dignity belongs to the person before anyone knows who they are. Adrienne deserved respect when she looked like an ordinary traveler in faded jeans. She deserved the same respect before anyone knew she was a colonel. She deserved it before anyone knew about the Pentagon. She deserved it before 3 generals entered the terminal. And every other passenger deserves the same. That matters because it is easy to treat people well once we discover they are important. The harder test is how we behave when we believe they have nothing to offer us. No status, no influence, no audience, no way to make us regret our behavior. That is when character shows itself. There is another lesson here about silence. The people at the gate were not all cruel. Most of them looked uncomfortable. Some were shocked. Some knew what happened was wrong. But knowing quietly and acting responsibly are not always the same thing. The woman who looked away may have believed the situation was none of her business. The man who stayed seated may have feared making things worse. Sierra worried about her job. Darius regretted that he did not speak sooner. Their fear was human, but the story shows how silence can still have consequences, even when it comes from discomfort instead of malice. That does not mean everyone should rush into a confrontation. Safety matters. Judgment matters. Sometimes the right thing is to record. Sometimes it is to call a supervisor. Sometimes it is to become a witness. Sometimes it is simply to say, I saw what happened, and I am willing to put my name behind the truth. What matters is refusing to let another person's dignity disappear because speaking feels inconvenient. Sierra's choice is important for that reason. She had seen warning signs before. She had been afraid. She had stayed quiet. Then she made a different choice. She pressed submit. One small action. No speech. No dramatic scene. No promise that she would be protected. Just a decision to stop helping silence do its work. That choice did not erase the earlier moments when she said nothing. But people are not trapped forever by the mistakes they made yesterday. Responsibility also means choosing better when the next opportunity arrives. Darius did the same. He could not go back and stand up during the incident. He could not undo the moment when Adrienne knelt alone. But he could walk to the security office afterward. He could give his statement. I could tell the truth. He could admit that he wished he had done more. That kind of honesty matters. It is easy to tell stories where good people always act perfectly, and bad people never change. Real life is rarely that simple. Sometimes courage arrives late. Late courage is still worth something when it becomes real action. The story also shows why leadership is measured by what happens before a crisis reaches the news. Graham did not throw the passport. I did not make every insulting remark. His failure looked quieter. A glance, a shrug, a habit of closing complaints. A decision not to check. That is why responsibility in leadership can be uncomfortable. A leader is responsible, not only for the orders they give, but for the patterns they allow to continue. Every complaint Graham dismissed taught Kendra something. It taught her that there would probably be no serious review. It taught other employees that speaking up might not matter. It taught passengers that the system could listen to them without actually hearing them. When leaders ignore small warnings, the organization often pays for a larger failure later. The airline's real lesson was not simply remove one employee. It was build a system where one employee cannot repeatedly harm people while complaints disappear. That is the difference between punishment and reform. Punishment asks who should face consequences. Reform asks what has to change so the next person is safer. Both can matter. But if only the first happens, the pattern may return with a different name behind the counter. Adrienne understood that. Her public message was not about revenge. She did not stand before the cameras and celebrate Kendra's termination. She did not say, "Look who I am." She asked something much harder. Would the system have protected someone without her rank? That question shifts the story away from status and back toward principle. If a rule only works when an important person is involved, it is not a fair rule. If respect only appears when powerful witnesses arrive, it is not genuine respect. If a complaint only matters once a video becomes viral, the process is already too late. The standard is what happens in ordinary moments. The quiet counter, the small office, the employee break room, the line where nobody knows your name. That is where culture lives. Kindness lives there too. Remember the elderly woman with the stuck suitcase. Adrienne helped her before any conflict began. No camera focused on that moment. No general was present. No one applauded. Adrienne simply saw someone struggling and helped. That small moment tells us as much about her as the confrontation does. Character is often revealed in what people do when there is nothing to gain. The same principle applies to Kendra in the opposite direction. She was warm to passengers she respected and cold to someone she had already judged. Her behavior changed depending on who stood in front of her. That is why fairness requires more than being nice to people we naturally like. Real fairness is consistency. It is giving the same patience to the tired traveler as the wealthy one, the same courtesy to the nervous passenger as the confident one, the same respect to the person in worn sneakers as the person in an expensive suit, and the same process to the unknown traveler as the colonel. There is also a lesson about self-control. Adrienne's calm did not mean she felt nothing. Her cheek hurt. Her hands trembled. The humiliation stayed with her. She remembered the silence. She remembered kneeling. Composure did not make the experience painless. It gave her space to choose her next step. She documented. She preserved details. She contacted the right people. She refused to give anger control over the record. That kind of calm can be powerful. But it should never be misunderstood as a requirement for someone who is being mistreated. People respond to humiliation in different ways. Some cry. Some freeze. Some become angry. Some need help finding words. Their dignity does not depend on reacting perfectly. Adrienne's response was shaped by years of military training. The deeper lesson is not that everyone should act exactly like her. It is that when possible, creating a little space between what happens to us and what we do next can protect us from making the moment even harder. A breath, a note, a call, a witness, a decision to document. Small actions can create that space. And then there is forgiveness. The story never tells us that Adrienne became close to Kendra. It never suggests that consequences should disappear. Forgiveness is not pretending harm did not happen. It is not asking the person who was hurt to carry the burden of making everyone comfortable again. Sometimes forgiveness is simply refusing to let bitterness become the next authority in your life. Adrienne remembered what happened. She used the memory to improve systems. She let the mark on her cheek fade. She did not build her identity around revenge. That is a quiet form of freedom. Accountability and compassion can exist together. We can believe that Kendra needed consequences and still hope she eventually understood why her choices caused harm. We can believe Graham failed as a supervisor and still recognize that people can learn from failure. We can believe Sierra should have spoken sooner and still honor the courage it took to speak when she finally did. Life is rarely improved by deciding that people are only the worst thing they have ever done. But life is not improved by pretending those things do not matter either. Wisdom lives between those extremes. Tell the truth. Accept responsibility. Repair what can be repaired. Protect the next person. Learn enough that the same choice does not repeat. That is what real accountability is supposed to do. Adrienne's story also leaves parents, mentors, and leaders with something to think about. Her father could not follow her through every airport. He could not protect her from every insult. What he gave her was deeper. He taught her to know who she was before the world had a chance to label her. That lesson stayed with her through military service, deployments, promotions, and one ugly moment at an airline counter. We cannot prepare the people we love for every situation, but we can give them values they can carry into situations we will never see. Self-respect, knowledge, patience, the courage to document, the confidence to ask for help, the humility to treat strangers well, the wisdom to know that power is a responsibility, not permission to look down on someone else. Those things travel farther than protection alone. And perhaps the most important lesson is the simplest. You never really know who is standing in front of you. But that should not be the reason you treat them well. Do not be respectful, because the quiet woman might be a colonel. Do not be kind, because the tired man might know the chief executive officer. Do not listen because the nervous teenager might have a lawyer in the family. Treat them well, because they are people. That is enough. The best version of this story would have ended at the first counter, with nothing dramatic happening. Kendra would have checked the ticket, verified the passport, said welcome aboard. Adrienne would have walked to her gate. Sierra would have finished her shift. No generals would have needed to intervene. No investigation. No viral video. No public apology. No reforms triggered by humiliation. Just ordinary respect. That would have been the better story. And that is the point. We should not need a scandal to practice decency. We should not need a powerful title to recognize dignity. We should not need a camera to do the right thing. The choices that matter most are often the ones nobody celebrates. The employee who stops a harmful joke before it becomes a pattern. The supervisor who takes the first complaint seriously. The witness who quietly says, "I saw what happened." The manager who checks the footage instead of protecting a favorite employee. The stranger who helps with a suitcase. The traveler who tells another passenger that the gate changed. The person who notices someone being treated differently and refuses to pretend they did not see it. Those choices may never trend online, but they build the kind of world people hope exists when they are the ones standing alone. Adrienne eventually boarded another flight from Atlanta. She wore ordinary clothes. She carried the same worn leather bag. Her steel watch still had scratches across the face. The gate agent smiled and welcomed her without hesitation. Adrienne walked down the jet bridge and took her seat. Outside the window, aircraft moved across the tarmac beneath the open Georgia sky. She thought about the first time she had stood at that airport after receiving the letter from the Department of Defense. She thought about the passport, the counter, the people who stayed silent, the people who later spoke, the changes that followed. Then she looked forward, because a painful moment can become part of your story without becoming the whole story. That is another form of dignity, knowing when to remember, knowing when to act, knowing when to let go, and knowing that no stranger gets to decide your worth for you. If this story stays with you, remember the quiet moments more than the dramatic ones. Remember Sierra's finger over the submit button. Remember Darius walking back because he regretted staying seated. Remember Graham's shrug and what years of shrugs allowed. Remember the older woman at the new gate whose shoulders relaxed when Sierra simply treated her with kindness. Remember Adrienne's father, telling her to know who she was so deeply that another person's opinion could not reach the center of her. And remember this: dignity is not a privilege reserved for people who look important. It belongs to everyone who walks through the door. Respect should not wait for a title. Courage does not always arrive with a speech. Accountability is not revenge. And kindness, especially when nobody important is watching, is one of the clearest ways we show who we truly are. The next time you find yourself at a counter, in a line, in a workplace, or simply standing close enough to see someone else being treated unfairly, you may not control the whole situation, but you still control your part in it. You can choose attention instead of indifference, fairness instead of assumption, courage instead of comfortable silence, responsibility instead of a shrug. And when the moment passes, those choices become part of the kind of person you are. That is the legacy worth carrying forward.